Welcome, everybody, to the conversation surrounding artificial intelligence in financial planning. I am joined here with John Howe-Wemett. If you'd like to introduce yourself, and then we'll kind of go around the room and give a brief introduction.
Yeah, I am John Howe-Wemett. I am a certified financial planner professional. I work at Generation Capital Management, and super thrilled to be here.
Great.
I am Pfleghardt. I work at Best Times Financial. I'm also a CFP and excited to talk about this topic today.
Josh Tatro. I am a duly registered representative out of Manning and Napier, based in Fairport, and then also offering securities through Royal Alliance Associates. I've been in the industry for a little over 10 years now.
Awesome. Well, just want to thank everybody for joining us, and I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation about artificial intelligence and how it plays a role in this profession. To kind of start out, I just want to get a sense of, obviously artificial intelligence, and the platform that I'm conducting the study on is ChatGPT, which is just kind of an analog basis artificial intelligence where you input a prompt and you also receive a prompt in type. So when you do that, you can't really get a sense of emotion. And I kind of want to just touch at how big emotion and behavioral finance kind of plays a role in your professions, and how that could be potentially something that artificial intelligence is lacking. Later, we're going to kind of jump into the actual prompts that were given to ChatGPT and then run through those and kind of get everybody's sense of how it could be done better, if it's sufficient, if it is something that could be plausible in the future. Mm-hmm. So if anybody would like to chime in about the importance of really understanding behavior and managing emotions with clients about specific topics, I think that's a really important thing to have in person.
Yeah, to that point, I think one of the areas where artificial intelligence, the way it is today, will fall short of being able to provide the same level of service as a financial planning firm is the fact that in life we have multiple goals. So right now, AI is designed to tackle one goal or one question at a time. Most of our job as financial planners is to help clients not only identify their goals, but prioritize them and help them discover that, if we implement strategies to cover this goal, that may affect your other goal here. So which one is more important, and how can we leverage the values between the two and the outcomes there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always say, and I think I might have brought this up in class, that there's always a financially optimal answer when you're dealing with a client, and then there's the answer that works for the client and their emotions. And those two don't always work together. They're not always the same thing. And I think that what AI is really good at is maybe the objective part, because as financial planners, we tend to use financial planning software as a big calculator, right? We try to figure out how to get the most money out of any given scenario, which I think I have confidence that eventually they'd be able to get AI to be able to do. But there's the other side that I don't know if AI would ever be able to understand the personality or the emotions of a client, and I think that's the real key, and why I don't necessarily feel like AI is going to be beating down our doors and taking our jobs anytime soon.
Right.
Sure. And I think the most emotionally charged conversations I have are in markets where they're challenging, and that's when clients are coming to the conversation with fear, or is my money going to last? Is the plan still going to work? And I don't think that it necessarily matters how many times the screen prompts them. Your chance of success has gone down a little bit, but it's still very high. Is that going to be what comforts a client? So having those real conversations and providing that sense of reassurance, I think, is something that you don't necessarily get, even though the technology is continually improving and the objective right answer, these machines are going to be able to come up with the calculator if you input everything correctly very, very well and very quickly. But it's one of those things that it depends on the person too, the client, but I think those emotional conversations are something that ChatGPT, at least not today, maybe hopefully not tomorrow, it can't quite do.
I agree. And kind of going off of that, when you have these very, very difficult conversations with individuals, and maybe it's kind of hard to get anything out of them, maybe it's a very emotional point that they don't really feel comfortable talking about, could you potentially see ChatGPT being this kind of, anonymous avenue where people can kind of ask these questions without any kind of judgment for these specific instances? I don't know, maybe a gambling addiction that somebody doesn't want to bring up to another individual, or a spending addiction that's kind of been behind closed doors. Do you think that, ChatGPT could be this avenue, or just artificial intelligence in general, could it be an avenue where this anonymity of the whole thing could benefit individuals in seeking help rather than speaking with an actual human being?
Yeah, I do think that there's something to be said for making resources available for people where they can start asking questions that they either feel embarrassed about or they feel like they should already know the answer to. Because most people have a difficult time with their pride. They don't want to admit that they don't know or that they have a problem, but they can feel it and they can start to seek out answers for themselves. I think maybe in that way, ChatGPT or other AI solutions could be useful.
Yeah, I've always looked at it as, and I do think it's a great tool for that anonymity. Right now, the way that AI is set up, it's a great tool to offer an entryway into more personalized advice. And in that circumstance right there, it provides someone with the ability to talk about an issue that they may be facing for the first time. And usually talking about it the first time is the most difficult. And as they start to feel more informed about it, they may then feel more comfortable talking with a professional, whether it's a financial planner or a therapist or an attorney or what have you. Just getting informed in the first place does help to open that up. And if AI is able to also bring into the conversation things like, hey, this is a very common theme and situation that people run into, it helps them feel less alone in that and really opens up the avenue for them.
There are always going to be self-reliant problem solvers too that just want the bare minimum interaction with anybody. We'll work with potential clients or people who just want a pointed answer to one question, and that's it. Maybe we never see them again. So I think it really does depend on the individual as well. I don't think any of our clientele are people that we've captured. They're a captive audience and they're forced to meet. It's usually people that come, they either, if it is a problem that maybe they know that they need to work on, they now have the courage to bring that to us. It's usually a volunteer basis. So it's finding those individuals that do need help. They are looking for more than just being pointed in the right direction. Those are the clients that we usually establish good relationships with and continue to work with in the long run.
Yeah, and I do wonder sometimes how many people we aren't talking to. Like, what is the ratio of people we're talking to versus people we're not talking to? People who either don't recognize that they need the help or believe that they can help themselves better than we could potentially help them. I genuinely have no idea, but based on the preponderance of people that we run into on a daily basis that probably don't have financial advisors or who have never engaged me about my profession when they know that I'm a financial planner, I would presume that it's a large number are not interested in professional services. So having some resource could be good for them.
It breaks down some barriers that as humans we just can't not have to. So someone wants financial planning advice on a certain topic at 2 a.m, ChatGPT offers them the ability to go in and at least research and get some general information around it. The other really great thing that I see out of AI, and I hope it continues this way, but right now it's there's no cost to it. So for someone that's just starting out, it's a really great avenue to get started, just to get rules of thumb on how to build a successful financial picture in the future. How do we start out?
Yeah.
And when I was recently looking at it, this is kind of an interesting route, but we're all familiar with robo-advisors and how it's different from AI, where it's literally just kind of allocating your money into specific portfolios with very little human interaction. Do you think that in the future with these low fees for most of them. I looked at one yesterday. I think it's 35 basis points for SoFi to manage your portfolio with no minimum contribution.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that in the future you could see kind of this artificial intelligence planner that we see kind of pair up with a robo-advisor to be this all-encompassing type thing? And do you think that's even possible to implement? And there's probably, from the conversation that we've already been having, that the human element of your profession is so integral to making these right decisions. But with the way that everything's going, with these robo-advisors becoming more and more popular, with AI kind of leading the charge with this whole tech space, do you think that that's a potential avenue where we could see this going? And is there any kind of fear within your position for that in the future?
I think to some extent. I mean, technology always has the potential to disrupt industry. I mean, you look at financial planning and investing largely. I mean, it's been changing since the 90s and the advent of target date funds, where you don't need an individual to curate and manage a risk-based portfolio for your time horizon and risk tolerance. Yeah. This is a pre-planned package. You put in the date that you're expected to retire, and it does everything for you. So, I mean, since literally the 90s, we've been progressing, and I think the best advisors are utilizing these tools as they come across, including the robo-advisors. And now, until AI gets to the point where it can capture my likeness and then use the robo-planning tools, and I don't know, as someone who is well outside the realm of my expertise, but once AI Josh Tatro can then meet screen time, and we have clients maybe several generations removed from today that are okay that AI Josh Tatro doesn't have a physical body, that maybe we're in danger. But I think until that happens, utilizing these tools, utilizing ChatGPT to become more efficient at what we do is really an augmenter to the industry as opposed to a competitor.
Right. Mm-hmm. So it's more of a potentially supplementary in the future, rather than kind of a competition versus human versus computer.
Yeah. It's
more of kind of a tool that might be able to make your job a little bit easier, kind of dive into this vast historical sum of information that AI has to kind of solve some of these nuanced issues that arise. So I think that's a great look at that, because in the news you see, artificial intelligence is going to take over all of these jobs, but I think what really is going to happen is these jobs are going to become easier to do for these individuals and make everything more efficient, potentially like reduce costs for individuals. Mm-hmm. If AI can do all of this kind of dirty work, then people in the financial planning industry can really focus on the areas that are important. Yeah, I never really thought of it that way. That was a good point, because in the media it's always just, where are these jobs going because of AI, but more of a tool rather than a competitor.
That's the way I see it. And for the record, I am kind of an eternal optimist too, so the computers could prove me wrong here, right. But I like to think, at least for now, while it's a tool, it's a useful one to use.
Right.
I see robo-advisors are truly built for the masses, and the way that they are set up today, they have been built for monetization. So one of the things that happens behind the scenes is you have investment companies putting in bids to be the chosen investment options on those platforms. Mm-hmm. And as soon as you get big money like that involved, something is bound to be missing in terms of personalization and customization for a client that really needs it. One of the areas where robo-advisors, they've been trying to do the best that they can, but they just haven't been able to truly hit this yet. And right now, ChatGPT specifically does not, is knowing the questions that a client should be asking. Part of our jobs as financial planners is to help clients discover areas that they may not have even thought about yet. And through our experience working with many different individuals and families, we can help them kind of pinpoint areas just by asking certain questions. And that's an area where AI, I don't think we're there yet. It's not truly a two-way conversation.
Yeah. And a lot of clients don't even know the questions that they have. And part of our experience is listening to the client and picking up So you have the primary question that a client is going to ask you, but surrounding that primary question is a bunch of stuff. It's a bunch of throwaway stuff that they think is throwaway, but as planners, we're picking up on it. So they're talking about how over the next year, when we're trying to decide how much we're going to invest, they're talking about, well, our spending is going to increase this year because we're going to spend an extra $100 a month on our mortgage. Wait, why? What's your mortgage interest rate right now? What are we trying to achieve by doing that? Are you sacrificing opportunities somewhere else to make that decision? So the primary question is, how much money do I have to invest? But the kind of peripheral conversation is, these are the other things I'm thinking about doing. But the client would only type into ChatGPT or another AI platform, how much money should I invest? Whereas all of this other conversation is also the really important stuff that we're picking up on that would be missing.
Right. And it's such a big part of your role when you first bring on a client is kind of doing this financial x-ray of deciphering where this money's going, what their plans are specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And by the looks of it right now, if you were to use ChatGPT to make a plan, they don't know you. They don't know, they can't put a face to the name. They don't know what kind of position you're in. They don't know, like, specifically the emotional aspect of it. They don't know how you're approaching this. It might be, you can't really tell when you're typing in a computer, but if I come to a planner and say, my goal is blank, 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 if I'm happy about this goal, if my goal is not strong enough, if my goals could be larger based on the expertise that everybody provides here, you're kind of selling yourself short if you don't have those additional questions that an advisor brings to you.
Yeah, you're bringing up the importance of prompting too, utilizing ChatGPT effectively. It's one of those things where you don't necessarily know what you don't know. So if you don't know how to ask this question to get the correct answer, ChatGPT doesn't know that.
Right.
And you're just going to answer the question as prompted. Whereas if somebody comes to us and this is the problem, and this is the scenario around it, we're able to build a much more detailed view of that and help to enlighten them in areas that maybe they hadn't thought of before. Whereas, it gets back to that, you don't know what you don't know. So if you're not aware of those things that can hurt you in the plan, even if you're a great user, querier of ChatGPT, maybe you're missing something altogether.
Mm-hmm. It's just like the annuity question in the survey that you posted. ChatGPT's response was educational. Mm-hmm. Josh and I were talking about this last night. It was educational enough, but it was almost too broad to the point where it could have potentially been dangerous. Mm-hmm. Where it's not exposing enough of the key issues. It talks a little bit about liquidity issues, a little bit about inflationary issues, things along those lines, but it doesn't cover some of the more challenging situations with annuities.
It's a very ground level analysis of what an annuity can do.
Yeah.
Another one that I kind of wanted to bring up was when I asked ChatGPT about, when should I invest in a Roth IRA versus a traditional IRA. And obviously, if you look that up on the internet, you're going to get a very ground level response to it. But when you're working with a financial planner, they can see your income. They can see kind of where you're allocating your assets. And it's a much more in-depth investigation into, if I do have a lower income, then I will invest in a traditional and the other way around. And it's so much deeper of a profession than kind of the media is making it seem. Mm-hmm. When the media talks about, we can do everything online now, it really is just ground level. And I think that a lot of what is going to occur, if it starts to occur, is just diluting good advice from advisors. I think that there's so much more that goes into a financial plan than just asking one question. It's a whole encompassing profession that you guys have worked on for your entire lives, and it is really, really interesting to see technology go this far. But at the same time, it's so much more than that, and that's one of the reasons why I want to get into financial planning, is because I like asking those kind of questions. Mm-hmm. I like diving into people's situations and figuring out what's the root cause of things, what are the angles you can take to reach these goals, and that's something that's lacking as of right now. Like we've said earlier, we don't know if there's going to be clones of us in 25 years, but for right now, I think that it's a good tool to have, but it should not be taken to heart. I don't know if anybody wants to kind of...
That IRA versus Roth IRA question, just a specific example that I was thinking of, and ChatGPT, I mean, they do a really great job of walking through the steps that you should be thinking through as you're making the decision for yourself. So back to that point of like, if you have a do-it-yourselfer, it does give them 80% of the tools to figure out should they be putting into an IRA, a traditional, or a Roth, whether it's 401k, IRA, what have you. Where it misses the mark, and this is just an example of that area where I don't believe that AI will be able to replace a human being behind the financial planning seat, is it misses the mark on things that it could affect on the outside. So for example, if you have a client that's 3 years out from retirement, let's say they're age 62, Medicare kicks in at 65, and if we just send everything to the Roth based on each of the steps that the client has gone through or the individual's gone through, they may kick themselves into a higher income tax bracket, and now they're paying $100 extra a month all through retirement for Medicare premiums. That is our job as humans to see that, and I don't think that AI is quite built enough
Yeah,
to
definitely.
be able to do that.
And kind of going off of that, one of the topics that we talked about so much in class was the way that we form questions when we're talking to a client. The way that you form the specific aspects of a sentence can severely impact the response that you're going to get from the client. And if this is a do-it-yourselfer that kind of wants to dive deeper into their financial plan and they're not asking the right questions, can we kind of go over some of the main problems that you could maybe see coming up if a random question was asked maybe in the wrong sense, in the wrong light, and ChatGPT could end up, making a terrible decision for an individual?
You had an interesting insight about this particular question.
So I really enjoy querying ChatGPT. It's been a fun pastime, and I did it a little bit more just in preparation for this. I think it's incredible to see the amount of data that it's able to eloquently put forward in a very coherent manner. The danger is, though, there are, and it asks you at the end, like, hey, grade this answer, looking for that feedback. And even in that Roth traditional IRA, there is some misinformation there in that it specifically noted that oftentimes the traditional IRA contribution limit is higher than the Roth IRA contribution limit, which we know that's incorrect. They're the same. Now, if you're looking at, maybe it's conflating step IRAs or traditional contributions to 401k, I don't know what it made, where the decision went wrong in order to spit that answer out, but it's factually incorrect. So things like that, I think that will continue to get better as the technology improves. My thoughts are that it will continue to become more and more accurate over time as opposed to less, but it just goes to show kind of the danger of relying on the technology to be the end-all be-all to give you these correct answers, and then, okay, well, I can contribute more to the traditional. I'm not even going to look at the Roth. I'm just going to contribute to the traditional. And again, that's not necessarily going to be something that's going to financially ruin someone, but maybe that's leading them to stay away from the Roth because they think that they can't contribute as much to it, where the Roth is a great tax diversification tool that would have been a very good thing to incorporate in their financial plan. So maybe a smaller example there, but it does illustrate that even mighty ChatGPT can get things wrong.
Right. And one of the other things that we're beating up on this question a lot, but there's a lot here. The other thing that this question really doesn't address is it addresses it, but it's really simplified. Of course, none of us know if we're going to be in a higher tax. None of us know. We can have a general idea, but none of us know for a fact whether we're going to be in a higher tax bracket now or in the future. It's just not possible for us to know that, and there's been quite a bit of discussion in the industry about trying to change the perception and change the utilization of Roth. That this absolutely doesn't take into account. So it's just a very base level, this is one consideration that a lot of us aren't even really thinking of that much anymore. So we can provide so much more, like this question alone, we can provide significantly more value. The three of us in this room could come up with ways to save people thousands of dollars over their lifetime, just based off of this one question. Whereas ChatGPT just kind of, not only does it just skirt around the issue, but it doesn't do well at it.
Right. Do you think that within these past, 10 years, so much of our lives has become automated, and so much of it's become so easily graspable, if that makes sense? We can access so much more information than we were able to 10 years ago. And from our groceries being delivered to our house, not even making 3 clicks, it already knows what you want to buy. Or, kind of doing your taxes, for example. Go on to TurboTax, you take a picture of your tax forms, and your taxes are done. Do you think that the lack or the kind of decrease in human interaction that we're having is a factor in why people are thinking that it could take away from the value given to financial advisors? Do you think that, like, since our society is just becoming more tech driven, is there any indicators that people are saying we'll go away with financial planners? We can just kind of do it on our own. We'll do it online. We'll find a robo-advisor. Is there any trends that you've seen with people kind of backing away from individual financial planners?
I think individuals have backed away from what a financial planner was 10, 15 years ago. There's a lot that, as financial planners today, we actually don't do things that financial planners 10, 15 years ago did. A lot of those dids are paperwork and hand filling things out and writing financial plans in Excel.
Listen.
But I think what people miss the mark on is that AI will weed out financial advisors who are only doing what AI is able to do itself, but it will increase the value and the level of financial advisors who know how to leverage it. So if any of the three of us in the room could offload 20% of what we're doing day to day to AI, we can then spend more time focusing on the emotions and clients' actual specific lives and checking in and spending more time being client facing, which I think can only improve everyone's experiences.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like there's a way for us to eventually implement AI in a way that will help us to standardize financial planning? Because I feel like, maybe this is just me, but I think that if the three of us had a set of data and we all put it into our financial planning software, I think that we would all produce 3 different financial plans. They'd be similar. I think that we could get to approximately the same conclusion that the client was okay or that they were not okay. But I think that the material calculations would look slightly different between the 3 of us. So do you think there's space for AI to potentially standardize that, or do you think that that's a specific value that we add?
I think there's a lot of room for AI to standardize it. One example that I can think of based on building a financial plan, I'm sure that the 3 of us in the room all have different growth rate assumptions on our investments, right? And each of our assumptions are based on research that we've heard and things that we have done, whereas AI may be able to bring it to the forefront and say, like, this is the correct growth rate assumption for someone that's this age, right? And their investment time horizon is this far out based on historical market environments. I do think that there's room to actually improve financial planning if AI is able to systematize some things like that. And I think it's a great opportunity to weed out some really bad eggs in the industry. I had an insurance policy from an incoming prospect. I did not run the illustration on it, on the quote, but they had this thing grow at 8%. And if you know anything about insurance in our world today, writing an 8% illustration, you're out of your mind. And I think if AI is able to say, nope, this is the correct assumed growth rate for this insurance policy or this investment policy, I think it could really help kind of put a better label on financial planning in our industry as a whole.
Do you think that, aside from the growth rate being standardized in this situation, do you think that the standardization of maybe just like general technique could kind of be could kind of hurt the profession in a way? Because there's different angles that you could approach. Like we just said, there's 3 financial planners that might approach it in different ways and come up with a plan that in the end goal, it has the same end goal. But do you think that, the approach, standardizing the approach kind of gets rid of the expertise and kind of the like artisanship of creating a plan? It's more of it's such a personal aspect to financial planning where you could choose Josh to do XYZ, or you could choose John or Kay to do a different form that tailors you more. I think that the standardization of not the growth rate, but the actual implementation of these steps could turn out to be like a worrisome aspect to ChatGPT. I think that.
Josh, I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I think that when I brought up the variances between our 3 financial plans, your reaction was kind of tepid. I didn't get the like enthusiastic yeah, absolutely.
Well, when it comes to, so I'll touch on growth rates quickly and then get back to kind of the next question there. I think there is to a large degree advancement in the financial planning software to this day. Even like you can plug in, you can essentially autopilot, at least in some of the financial planning softwares that are out there based on their age. You can autopilot the growth rates based on their retirement date, and then it moderately aggressive based on this because you're retiring now and you have this amount, and then you can kind of play with what those growth rates are. But I think whether using that, or then you can use Monte Carlo as well, so it's not just a flat growth rate, and is that really impacting the result of the plan, versus straight line? If your straight line is not is conservative in that you're not overinflating what you think that this person's going to be able to get. I think so long as you're getting to kind of the crux of what it is that we're planning for, so in the case of retirement planning, so long as you're being accurate, not disingenuous, like Kay was saying, it's really important as a planner to not use rates that are going to provide this product or the solution that looks so rosy for the client that they're going to say yes. I think it's really important to hold ourselves to that standard in doing that. And I think the tools have been there to provide that to some extent. And I'd like to think that I, as a planner, tend to err on the side of more conservative. So when we see these things, if a plan's tight, I'm not going to say, well, maybe if I bump it up another % growth rate, maybe now it looks good and I can deliver good news to the client. Right. Where I think a planner worth their salt is going to be taking a look at these scenarios, make sure that they're being accurate with those growth rate assumptions and giving good information and feedback loops to the client so that they can implement the changes that are ultimately going to lead to a better solution. And you're going to have to refresh me on what the follow-up. So that was the growth rates, and then we were talking
standardizing the financial planning.
Yeah, well, I think there's to some degree you need some form of standardization of care. Like if we were to go through, maybe we all have somewhat different signature styles in doing our fact finding, but at the end of the day, I need to know assets, I need to know insurance, I need to know what kind of liabilities you have, I need to know, do you have kids, do you have loved ones, are there any other external factors? Like if we're not getting all of that information, regardless of what program we use or what the process is, if we bring someone else on board, without that information, we're not able to do our jobs effectively. Mm-hmm. And there are some clients, I think, who I work with a client that's, okay, you're just working on this, and this is my retirement picture. I like to play on my own with this individual account. You're not going to touch it or see it ever. But I really want to make sure that I'm not messing up retirement. So help me with that. Let me know if I'm on track. So there are individuals like that too, because it's a big decision. I mean, I myself, when I go to retire, I'm sure I'll be bringing John or Kate, because it's just this is what I do for a living. But when it comes to my retirement, making sure that me and my wife and my family did I miss something, and I think that's where ChatGPT can be effective too. Is the reassurance. The more double checks you have, within reason, you don't want to spend 2 years to develop a good financial plan, but I think it's important to have those guesses and checks.
And my generation is so like I was saying earlier, connected with technology. Do you see that with the increased usage of artificial intelligence in my generation? Do you see that individuals will kind of be likely to not consult financial planners in the future? I know that older generations are more willing to consult in person.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any indicators that it's kind of starting to drop off with Gen Z kind of coming out of college and being able to accumulate assets, start families? Have you seen any indicators that things are starting to drop off with counseling for financial planning, seeking counsel?
So I don't know how many millennials or Gen Z you guys work with, but I feel like I'm starting to kind of dabble more and more in the millennial marketplace just because of how our business is structured. And I know that this isn't Gen Z, but to kind of step back from boomers to our parents' generation and then to kind of where we are with millennials. I think that millennials have a similar level of adoption to financial planning as older generations. It's just that they don't have the assets yet. And I have found in my interactions with Gen Z that they're almost better interactors with people. They tend to be a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more engaged while they're talking to the people around them. Maybe it's just the people that I've been interacting with. Maybe I've been fortunate in that regard, but I think that a lot of I think that people will always seek people. There will always be people who want to work with people, and there will always be people who don't want to work with people. And I don't think that that's necessarily generational. I think it's just the way that we are as people. And I hope that I think that there will be avenues for. I think that if AI can fill a space for people who don't want to interact with people, I hope it can do the job that, at least a partial job of what a planner can do, to give people who are kind of left in the lurch right now that opportunity. I think that it's a new market. I don't think it's our market, and I don't think that it's a market that is for people who aren't interested in financial advice at all. I think that it's a completely separate market, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I think that it will grow to fill that maybe sometimes I want to talk to someone, maybe sometimes I don't type of person, regardless of generation.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point. I think the market that the ChatGPTs of the world will really fit well is a market that may already exist, right? We have our do-it-yourselfers. It's just their work and trying to do it themselves has been much more difficult. So now it will be a little bit easier for them. And I think the more that we can get sound financial advice out to the masses, us as a society, I think the better off. Because the fewer bankruptcies that we have for business owners and individuals and, the less homeless people. I mean, I'm going to extremes, but, each individual that can get better advice and follow through on it, like, that helps our world. But then also, to your point, there will also always be people who want to focus on what they're good at. So, for example, you have a brain surgeon. A brain surgeon wants to do brain surgery. They don't want to build their financial plan.
Right.
So oftentimes that's where we step in and they say, listen, here's my information, tell me what to do, because I don't have time for this. I want to do what I'm good at doing.
Yeah, and to your point that ChatGPT and these other AI outlets can be the form of much needed financial literacy for some marginalized groups that don't have access. But the most important point of this entire conversation is to make sure that ChatGPT is giving sound recommendations.
Absolutely.
While these individuals might not be able to afford 1% of their assets a year to a financial planner, if they can learn a little bit of how to be more tax conscious or how to plan for the future in a better way without paying, then it's better for all of society. The question surrounding this entire kind of podcast is if it is capable of doing that. So I think that point of helping individuals that don't have the resources to consult with a financial planner, I think it's an amazing avenue that individuals can take to really learn more about what's going on with this kind of crazy, nuanced world of financial planning that you guys have all had the ability to live in for a while now. So,
Yeah.
I think there's a real element, too, of aging into needing planning. You see, like 22-year-old Josh Tatro needed much simpler advice that ChatGPT would have probably been able to provide than 35-year-old Josh Tatro, and probably that 55, 65-year-old Josh Tatro is going to need. So I think recognizing what ChatGPT is able to accomplish within constraints and do accurately, hopefully, it can be a real benefit to people who may not need to spend time and resources on a financial planner if the problems are very easily solved by something like ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's a great point. I had a conversation with a client today who has an incredible financial vocabulary. You can tell that they've been paying attention for a long time. And because of that vocabulary, they were able to realize that they were in over their head. Like they're at a point now where they have the assets, they have the income, they have the complications in their tax situation, that they need a financial team. Without the understanding without that vocabulary, which ChatGPT could potentially provide to younger people or people who don't have access to a financial planner, without that vocabulary, you don't necessarily have that moment of inflection where you realize that you need the help, because if you have more money coming in the door, it just means that you can spend more to a lot of people, right? As long as I'm not going into debt, and as long as I'm saving a little bit for retirement, I'm probably doing okay. And honestly, you probably are. But those are the types of situations where if you continue to let your lifestyle creep up and not be aware of at least what's going on, then it can lead to really challenging circumstances. But developing that vocabulary of simply asking a question, like I will give ChatGPT a lot of credit, the vocabulary is there. It misses the mark sometimes, but the vocabulary is a fairly high level vocabulary, at least to get people thinking in the way that we think and communicating in the way that we communicate, I think, on a regular basis.
I completely agree. It's amazing to me that in 15 seconds, the well thought out, coherent answer that it can do that would take me half hour to write.
Right,
Incredible.
exactly.
What's funny is ChatGPT's answer, like how many times have you had a friend or a colleague or a family member ask you that exact question and you spend 45 minutes formulating an email that says exactly that, because we don't yet have the specific information ourselves, so we have to keep it general to make,
Right.
That's the part where I really see AI helping to free up time, because that is time and space, really, because that's almost more exhausting than providing an actual recommendation sometimes. It's trying to skirt around the answer because we don't have enough information yet.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Josh.
No, I was just going to say, what a great time saver to utilize that as a tool. ChatGPT comes with that in 15 seconds. We know what's right or wrong in the answer. Now that just saved me an hour of work.
Yeah.
Of having to formulate that and then send it on. I think that's such a great point.
Yeah, and we were just talking to a friend of ours. I write a lot of content for our social media and blog and stuff like that. And we were talking to a friend, and he said, well, you should just have ChatGPT write all of your social media content. And I was like, that's a really good idea, because it takes me so long to write social media. And it's just, honestly, the social media content is just blurbs, right? It's just that general, like, kind of catchy information that has that vocabulary, which ChatGPT obviously has. So that's, to Kay's point, what a way to leverage saving time, you know?
Yeah.
Kind of one of the more interesting questions, not really surrounding financial planning, but to round things out, where do you think you see artificial intelligence going into other professions, kind of taking over maybe more than financial planning? And just otherwise, in just general life, do you theorize any kind of angles where ChatGPT can, or artificial intelligence can make life easier or make things easier? I've been thinking about it and trying to think of certain professions where it can kind of take a larger role than it is now. But I was wondering if any of you had a take on that.
I've always thought that AI would be really great for our Internal Revenue Service to catch up on things. Because at the end of the day, the main function of the Internal Revenue Service is to review reported tax returns, and it's an understaffed place. And everything is now filed electronically. So the systems from a very foundational and baseline are there, and the information's now being loaded electronically. Is there a way where we can finally catch up and give people more real-time feedback on their tax returns, instead of individuals finding out that they're being audited for a tax return that was filed 7 years ago?
Right.
I've given a lot of thought to kind of just how interesting it is what has happened with ChatGPT. I think that technology in general has been so disruptive of industry just over the last 200 years. It's incredible to see what's happened. I think even looking back 20 years ago, though, you would have thought, what's going to be safe is creative industries, writers, artists, and now, in just looking at what ChatGPT is able to do, and you and I were talking a little bit before about image generation. It's image after image and thought-provoking style with Mark Twain's humor. Like, it's able to live so many lifetimes in a second with all the programming and testing that's going on that you literally, for the best writers, need to experience a whole lifetime to be able to do what it's able to do. So I think the scary thing for me is that it's so good and effective as a communicator, and I think communication is at least a little bit an art form, and the further into the arts that you get, I think the more it's able to do that, and it's sometimes right now it's just as a fun hobby to see, well, what does ChatGPT say? Can I write this haiku with this theme, and how quickly it's able to do it. I think that's probably the scariest thing, is the creative industry, which I thought for so long was probably untouchable, because how can you recreate imagination, and what it's able to do so quickly is really mind-blowing to me. Yeah.
One of the big challenges that I had this past semester when I was teaching your class, last year when I taught the same class, I used all papers. So every week there was a reflection paper, like a couple pages. But I kind of identified that wouldn't really be a great option this time around, because someone could write a 250-page paper about financial therapy or retirement planning or IRAs, something, or using this article. And so that made me, as someone trying to teach you guys, and understanding that tool was available, try to come up with different ways to engage you, and also to test your level of understanding of the material. And of course, that I don't want to walk into every situation with the assumption that people are going to use that tool as an end around. But I have sneaking, not in the class that I taught, but in some of my other classes that I've taught, that I feel like maybe someone wasn't quite as good of a writer as their paper led on, and it makes me wonder if maybe, especially because their second paper wasn't as good, which was a little bit more personalized and things. So it just makes me kind of wonder what the situation is and the extent to which it's being used in college settings. And that's a challenge for professors at St. John Fisher, to Ivy League, to MCC, I mean, everywhere. So that's the biggest area that I see a challenge that AI is going to pose. I don't necessarily know where else it could provide a lot more value. I'm sure that there are millions of professions where it could. But yeah.
Just jumping on to that point, sorry to interrupt, but I know, always. I mean, I could foresee there becoming a day where ChatGPT or AI in general, this is terrifying to think, but they could basically become the main stakeholder and leader over our education systems. We know, like, that post-high school is extremely expensive right now. So if there are ways to systematize educational, and this could be K through 12 at some point too, but we could see teachers being replaced. New York State's got the same curriculum in every high school right now. That was a big movement about a decade ago. And, you know, the sad part is that I think for a lot of schools, they actually lost ground in their level of education that students were getting, but others it did help kind of bring the curve up. When you know, if we look at ourselves as a nation and really as a world to say, okay, we want every 7-year-old to be educated on this, this, and this, if we know what the standards are, AI can do a lot of that. You're always going to need some humans in those facilities for students who are struggling or do fall behind, and that's the scary part. But from a baseline, getting education out to the masses, AI could take some of that over.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I'm going to be out of a job. At least here. No one's going to need me anymore.
Universal basic income, John. It'll be okay. Once AI takes over everything.
An area that I do think any sort of artificial intelligence, I don't know if it'll ever be able to cover this, and we don't know what artificial intelligence of the future looks like, but I can think of 3 different clients that I work with right now who are experiencing dementia or manic depression or addiction issues. And that changes your mindset. So when you have dementia, you may still think that your husband is alive, and you may ask artificial intelligence about financial planning based on the fact that your husband's still alive. Or, you know, that you're still going to work every day, or what have you, just the information's not correct or accurate. And when you have a robot spitting back out information, it's going to base it on that. So there will need to be, and this goes across really all professions, but there will always need to be humans there monitoring things like that to make sure that AI is not, you know, providing really any recommendation, and it's able to kind of turn the systems off and say, I can't provide information around this for you right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, there have been so many think pieces on the robo-advisor for the past decade, at least. As long as at least you and I have been in the industry.
I was scared to go into the industry because of all the robo-advisors.
Yeah, so
the end of the industry.
So before that.
I'm getting into.
And we were just saying last night, where is it? We still have jobs. All 3 of us still have jobs, and I don't see us being put out by robo-advisor technology anytime soon. Robo-advisor's here. It exists. The difference for AI is that it provides a more personalized response on some financial planning issues. But I guess the ultimate question is, do I feel threatened? Do I feel like it will ever be at a point where it can take over our jobs? And my conclusion right now is no. I would love to be right, because I would like to not lose my job to a computer.
To John 2.0.
To John 2.
2055.
It won't even write a joke for me if I ask it to. But I don't see it. And there's just too much power in the power of a relationship between two people or three people or four people when they're sitting down at a table trying to come up and solve a problem that they're facing together, or that someone is hired to resolve for them.
And the higher the stakes, I think the more critical that component becomes. I think for people within that magic window of 5 to 10 years from retirement or right on retirement's doorstep, even if they've never worked with a planner before, they've been comfortable, there's a lot of uncertainty crossing over that threshold into retirement to make sure that, because it's a much riskier thing to get wrong at that point than it is at any other. So I think so long as there are consequences for getting the plans right, people want to be able to go to a resource that will be accountable to help see the success of the plan. Again, the eternal optimist in me says that at least in the short term, mid to short term, we'll be okay.
I concur.
It's very reassuring to hear, because it's a scary world where robots take over. It's been talked about for centuries, and it's kind of the first real, when you can see it work. You can download ChatGPT and see it work. It's the first real kind of, wow, this stuff is good, but it's not good enough at the moment. So it is kind of reassuring to hear that it's not imminent.
Yeah, and I will say too, that was a perfect way of wrapping this all up, but I just have to punctuate this.
Yeah.
There's a part of the strength of, I think, what we do is that we've helped hundreds of households. And all of my website copy that I'm writing, everything, literally hundreds of households. So we've seen a myriad of situations. We still haven't seen every situation. Every situation that we see is different. But from that experience, we can create a solution for this, whatever situation is in front of us. My only concern is AI getting smart enough to do the exact same thing, because we can never see millions of households, right? But it's a similar experience to what AI is doing. It's aggregating situations, and it's aggregating things that it's learned and then applying them to a particular situation. If it can get to that point, then maybe we have a problem, but I still think that you need a person to be able to communicate it and identify. So I think that that's the only concern that I really see, is that the mass of aggregation, when I know that part of my value is the aggregated experiences that I've had and will continue to have.
Well, that sums it up pretty well. I mean, I think it's a very necessary conversation that we had, because there are some people that just take what ChatGPT says and uses it in any way, whether that's for their education or for their personal life. And I think that this conversation, hearing from experienced professionals in the industry, it's important to hear for some individuals, because some people take it at face value and use it however they want, but it's important to see that it's really needs some work.
Yeah.
And nothing can really beat the human interaction, I think. I think that's... Anything else?
No, thanks
Covered all the bases.
for having us. Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation a lot.
Yeah, it's been
Thank
great.
you guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Awesome.